And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast.
Flippity-jibbity nonsense.
I thought it was terrific.
It's not just big, it's yeah!
Let's go!
Welcome and thanks for watching and listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jeff Morey and I am your host. This week I am super excited to welcome my very first international guest to the show. Her name is Dr. Kate Cherrell, and she is a writer, broadcaster, TV star, paranormal investigator, and paranormal historian. Kate is a luminary in all things paranormal and is a fascinating person. She is very well known in the UK and one of the most sought after speakers and personalities in the paranormal. So I'm excited to talk to her and learn more about her work and what she is up to these days.
Kind of putting this project together, I was connected with Dr. Kate Cherrell. Kate's PhD is in spiritualism in Victorian Gothic. She is a far more qualified researcher than I probably would ever be.
I've just watched so many amazing videos. We've got cryptids, aliens, ghosts, we've got it all. I can't wait for you to see this. It's going to be amazing. It's going to blow your mind.
So without further ado, I want to welcome my guest this week, Dr. Kate Cherrell, to the show. Welcome, Kate, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting me on, and thank you for pronouncing my name right. That's such a novelty nowadays.
Oh, good. I'm glad I got it right. So before I dive into asking you all about your work, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what it was that drove you to spend your life researching and talking about the paranormal?
Yeah, it's not really, certainly not the norm, is it? But my name's Kate Cherrell, or Dr. Kate Cherrell, if you want to add all the certificates onto things. I'm a writer, a researcher, a broadcaster from the UK, and I specialise in paranormal history. So when I appear all over whatever internet thing or whatever TV thing I'm on, I'm usually credited as a paranormal historian. So that basically means that I live a very isolated life, and I spend much of it looking into the history of ghost stories, of the cultural significance of ghosts, social changes that we can see through the paranormal. So I'm fascinated by that, endlessly fascinated, and my real passion is for the 19th century and spiritualism and how our attitudes to spirits and ghosts and paranormal contact began to shift. But I've been fascinated by the paranormal and broadly all things strange since I was a little girl. You know, I stood no chance in school when some of my first books were about ghosts and aliens. You know, I was never going to be one of the cool kids, was I? But since I was a child, I was absolutely fascinated by these stories. Some of the first images I saw before I could even read were quite famous paranormal photographs from the UK. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but there's this image called the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, and I have heard of that. It's quite a famous photograph of this blurry sort of figure on a grand staircase, and that just fixed in my head. at a young age. And then as I got older, I had some strange experiences. I stayed with my sister for a while, and she lived in what I would broadly call now a very haunted house. So I had some extreme experiences there. And then as I got older, I just became obsessed with trying to figure out what that was and who else had experienced things like that. And then after, a lot of adulthood in academia, I turned it into this strange little job where I talk about ghosts for a living. So little Kate is very pleased with where we've ended up.
I've got to say, paranormal historian, that is one of the coolest job titles that I think I have ever heard. You hear people, you ask people, what do they do? I'm a grocery store clerk, or, I so many different jobs and things. That is literally one of the coolest job titles I think I have ever heard. Is you're a paranormal historian. I know that's not all
it's a weird one, isn't it?
Well, I think the cool kids are the ones that should be laughing now, because you're the one that's getting all these podcasts and getting all this media and been all these TV shows. So I'd say little Kate's smiling right now.
Yes. Yeah. I hope so.
So let's dive into this a little bit more. So you're very, very well known in the UK, but for any of my listeners over here in the States that might not know you, could you tell us a little bit more about what it is you do and your work?
Okay, so in terms of things that are more public facing, I do a lot of lectures. So with my academic background, I lecture all over the UK about all really cheery things. So I do a lot about death, a lot about mourning, Victorian death practices. I do a lot of lecturing on spiritualism and the Gothic. That was kind of my academic specialty. But I also have done a lot of paranormal investigation on TV shows. So I've done a couple of series of a show called Haunted Homecoming, where I co-hosted with a celebrity. So the first series I did with Jack Osborne. The second one I did with Jonathan Ross, the very famous UK talk show host. And in between that, I've done various other things. I've done a show called Unexplained Caught on Camera, which is reviewing video clips that people have taken from around the world, saying,
Great show.
I'm on a
Great
boat.
show.
Oh, thank you.
I've seen that.
So
I've actually seen that. I enjoy that show. I've actually watched that show quite a bit.
Yeah, it was really enjoyable because it was very think on your feet sort of approach to things. You weren't told what clips they were, and suddenly you're watching a guy say, by the way, this is a video of a Wendigo, or this is a video of a mermaid, and you have to go, okay, what's every single fact I've ever learned about these things? So that was really interesting, and I love seeing the diversity and the different relationships that people have with the paranormal, with the unexplained. Done that. I've done I appeared as a paranormal historian on a BBC show called Paranormal. I've been on several episodes of Weird Britain, which is quite self-explanatory. There's a lot of weird stuff here, myself included, and so every now and again I appear as a guest star on that and present something odd from the middle of nowhere. So I do a lot of that. I've run a website called Burials and Beyond for many, many years now, where I kind of chronicle some of the stranger things in history, from trapdoor coffins to magical stones and all manner of nonsense that people can have a giggle over. So yeah, I do a lot of work. I've done podcasts over the years. I did 3 series of a podcast called Loopholes, which was taking a sideways look at the paranormal. But I'm always working. I've written a book called Begotten. That came out this year.
You do everything. You are everywhere.
Yeah,
You're literally everywhere. So
yeah, I'm like mold.
I don't know how you do it. People here in the States like to talk about history, and especially paranormal hauntings and how they tie to specific places, people, and even objects. But let's be honest here, apart from the Native Americans who have lived here for a very long time, what we now know as modern day Americans have only been here for a little over 400 years. Europe, and more specifically the UK, has places such as Chillingham Castle, for example, that have been around since the 12th century. So we're talking about history in places that date back more than double how long our oldest structures have been here. That's hundreds of years of more history and events for which to potentially investigate. I'm sure it's just another day at the office for you, but What's it like to have the opportunity to visit and investigate some of these incredible places?
Well, I investigated Chillingham Castle a few years ago, and it was fabulous. It was a fascinating place, and like you say, having so many centuries of history to tap into, it almost doesn't matter if there's nothing paranormal, because you can still sort of bask in the knowledge that you're just, that you're a tiny, tiny part of something much larger and much older. But I really do think that in the UK we're kind of spoilt. We don't realize how lucky we are to have so many ancient structures around us, and the amount of kids you'll see that are being dragged on a day trip to a castle somewhere, that has its foundations in 14th century or something. And they would rather be anywhere else in the world. They just want to be, on their tablets or, playing Fortnite. But yeah, I think we kind of lose sight of the amazing history that's in our back gardens, quite literally sometimes. So it is a privilege. It's a privilege to investigate a lot of these places. But I do think as well that if we accept the paranormal and paranormal occurrences as not being tied to a specific era, a specific framework, then we can really appreciate the great breadth of paranormal history that the States has. But I think certainly we can get really tied up in our ideas of what a proper haunting is. And I think really certainly with the US, with Canada, with the UK, a lot of our ideas of what a proper haunting is very much Victorian. We want grey ladies in big bustled dresses, and we want tiny little chimney sweeps who all sound like they're from East London, regardless of where they are in the world. They're always going, "Oh, at governor." So I think we can appreciate hauntings and the paranormal in whatever capacity we find them, whether they're in a modern house, a bungalow, right through to an ancient castle. But certainly I do love that I've got this great breadth of locations that I can go and visit. But also, you might think castles are fun and wonderful, lovely, look gorgeous. Oh, I can pretend to be Robin Hood for the day. They are freezing. Castles do not have central heating. They
and
are
insulation,
the most.
I would assume so.
Exactly. No insulation, nothing. You think it's wonderful. Oh, I'm going to go investigate Chillingham Castle. Are you? You need to pack 6 thermal layers and hot water bottles and bobble hats. And by the end of it, you're just this big mass of wool, just shouting, "Is there anybody there?" So the glamour certainly drops off in reality.
I would love to. I've never been outside of the States myself, but it would be a dream to go and see some of these places that you've been. I just think I've been a history buff anyway. I just think it would be just incredible to go visit some of these locations that you get to go to. Do you have a favorite location anywhere? Is there one particular investigation or place that you've been that stands out that just always you come back to that you think is your favorite?
Yeah, see, I wish I had that loyalty. I really do. Because I'm very taken with whatever place gives me a new experience. So the place that I've returned to quite a few times is a very unassuming building called Warmley Clock Tower. And it's just outside of Bristol in the UK. And I think it's an old 18th century pin making factory, but it's all been completely, ripped out, heating's in. All the more reason to love it. You don't freeze to death while you're there. But it's quite an unassuming place. But I've had the most amazing, intelligent communications while I've been there. Mainly when it's just been women sat around a table as well. We've had intelligent communications, we've had knocks, we've had hair being pulled. So that's always very exciting that you're getting tangible evidence in places like that. But I recently investigated a place called Hellfire Caves in Buckinghamshire, which is kind of one of those infamous places worldwide.
Very infamous. Oh yeah.
Yeah, not least because it sounds really cool. Like Hellfire Caves. Come on, there's going to be spooks there. But I investigated there recently, and I had some. It was an amazing, amazing investigation. But that's one of those places as well that has the most phenomenal history around it. So it's a network of man-made caves from the 18th century. This man called Francis Dashwood carved it all out, because in those days, if you had the cash and you didn't have telly, why not build yourself your own cave system? And then in it, put in a very, very decadent gentleman's club where you could do all manner of nefarious things underground and no one would call you out on it. So not much has changed over the centuries, but it's the most amazing and really disconcerting place, because it's this weird network of caves that have all been sort of shored up. They've all been bolstered over the years. Sound travels differently. The way you feel in those areas travels differently. You're right below a graveyard as well. And so when you get drips from the graveyard, there's the little bit of, oh, is this condensation? Is this something with a bit of person in it? So you've got all of this going on. But that, I find, is a phenomenal place. And that recently, I did a solo vigil and we managed to capture some footsteps on the gravel going around me. And we also managed to capture like a woman's voice sort of giggling in the background as well. And we were so worried that it wouldn't come through on the recording equipment, but we've managed to get it. So that's very exciting. But yeah, and anywhere that's interesting, I'm always giddy about visiting a new location. Yeah.
As I know you've probably had many across the years, but is there any paranormal experiences that you've had yourself that kind of stand out to you? Physical, emotional. I know you're doing seances and all these things at these different places. Can you talk about a few of those? I'd love to hear about some of your experiences.
Oh my goodness. Well, recently I investigated an old building in Stratford-upon-Avon, which is mainly known as Shakespeare's birthplace. And there's a lot of Tudor buildings there that are in stunning condition. And I investigated one of these. And I don't know what, I'm really bad at dressing for the occasion. And so for this, I thought, I'm not going to wear a sensible jumper and trousers. I'm going to wear what I can only describe as a cocktail dress, which is one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made. But I decided, no, I'm gonna look nice for this. Obviously, froze half to death during it. But we were calling out to this male spirit who was known to sort of prowl a certain area of this building and wasn't too fond of women. And so the amount of times that I've been used inadvertently as bait for angry spirits, it doesn't bear thinking about. But we were asking, you know, could you touch one of us? Could you touch our hair? Could you touch our shoulder? All very normal. I went to move and all of a sudden I felt a hand on my backside and it wasn't one of my team members. And you've never seen me jump so high in my life. I've never been assaulted by a ghost before, but finally in Stratford, it happened. So that was quite memorable. That doesn't happen very often. But in other instances, I've had really, really beautiful experiences. I know things like spirit boards can be very, very controversial. A lot of people think, oh, it's all psychosomatic, it's all subconscious movement. Other people think they're very dangerous. And I think the truth, rather unhelpfully, is somewhere in between. But I've had some experiences where we were calling out to anyone who was present, and this was in like a medieval crypt. So we were expecting like an ancient monk to come forward. But all of a sudden, it started spelling out my granddad's name. My granddad had a very, very unusual name. And so I stepped away from the board and thought, I'm influencing this. And no one else.
Unsettling for me.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, the right thing to do is to step back and then just see what happens. And his middle name was really unusual. His middle name was Warnford. And I said, can you spell out his middle name? Letter by letter, it went perfectly to Warnford. Asked some specific questions about my family, and it got them dead on. And it was strangely comforting, especially as I asked a few questions about the well-being of family members who were very ill at the time. And I got such lovely short but messages of reassurance through that board, and everything that they said came to pass. And so I think that's kind of the two extremes. You can have something that's really stupid and funny, and then in the next breath you can have something that's so almost transformative and really reassuring. And so that's why I think, like you said, with seances, I think seances are so powerful and really they're really personal acts that I think aren't celebrated enough for how important they can be for people who need it, who need that little bit of reassurance. So yeah, I mean, I could go on for ages about all manner of nonsense. I've had hair pulled, I've had stones thrown, doors
Really?
opened and closed. I had a really weird turn in, it was an old coaching inn down south, down near Cornwall, and part of it used to be the bar where people entered after taking their horses round the back. And it was so strange because people were calling out and we weren't getting anything. And all of a sudden I started seeing almost like shimmers, as if people were walking up to the bar for a drink. And if there were people
Wow.
walking in and out of the room, it was very odd. That did freak me out a bit, because it seemed like I was suddenly sat in a pub full of people who were looking at me and wondering what on earth I was doing there. So that I found quite disconcerting. So yeah, I've been quite fortunate, but I suppose it's like with so many other pastimes or special interests, you have to do so many dud investigations where you get nothing to get that one where you think,
Right,
oh, this is
right.
this is why I do it. This is why I do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I had some paranormal investigators from New England on the show a few weeks ago, and they were talking about that. And this is going to kind of lead into my next question that I was going to get your opinion on anyway. They talked about how they could be investigating a place for 2 weeks. You see on TV where, a show Ghost Hunters or something like that, where, or especially Zach Bagans. I like to talk about him because everything's a demon with him. And I think he's a little extreme and a little out there, not calling him out or anything, but it just seems like everything's a demon and everything's a haunting, everything's a ghost with him. People investigate for a very long time before they'll have experiences. And that's a perfect lead into my next question, because I figured you'd be great to ask this and get your opinion. I've noticed in some of my chats with some of the most well-respected paranormal, especially UFO researchers, that there seems to be a philosophical divide in how people approach paranormal research. Many of the people I've spoken with will tend to get disgusted with how paranormal research is portrayed on television and in the media versus how true paranormal researchers actually go about studying the paranormal in the field when the cameras are turned off and it's about the research and not the money. As someone who's a legitimate paranormal researcher and someone who also appears on TV, what are your thoughts on the commercialization and basically sometimes disingenuous approach to paranormal investigations that we see on all these TV shows?
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to have to be so careful with how
I know. It's just something that,
Oh, no.
For us behind the scenes that we want to know about.
Yeah. No, it's something I'm really, really passionate about. And I think it's something that we need to definitely speak about more. Absolutely. I think paranormal investigations on TV are such different beasts to paranormal investigations that enthusiasts do. And that I think you can't even compare them as the same thing. They rely on the same principles. They'll often use some of the same frames of reference, the same tools, things like that. However, with paranormal investigation on TV, like you say, you can investigate somewhere for 2 weeks. Even a standard investigation tonight, if you go on a public investigation, you'll get 5 hours, maybe 8 hours if you really, crack on with the whole thing. Whereas on a TV show, you have these amazing locations at your fingertips. You get to investigate. But by the way, you've got, let's say, I think I've had everything from half an hour to 4 hours to investigate one specific location. And it's not just investigate it, it's you need to present it to camera. You need to know exactly what you're doing. You need to hold everything perfectly for the camera. And also, most importantly, you need to get evidence. And that's the really tricky thing, because if you're going into it as well saying, I'm a legitimate investigator, I'm not going to, suddenly start pretending I'm possessed or that there's if you're trying to do it within your own personal ethical guidelines, that's when you kind of just have to throw everything at it. And I think when there's a lot of criticism about the prevalence of paranormal equipment on TV, I think it's kind of just a necessity, because if you have half an hour to go and try and get some evidence from a space, and you say, no, I'm just going to call out and I'll wait for something to respond. If you don't get anything in that half an hour, the whole production shut down. So
Right.
if you have loads of equipment that you can use, you kind of just have to throw everything at it and kind of hope for the best.
Hope for the best.
So it's completely different circumstances to like normal paranormal investigation. But I think it's a really interesting question, because even saying the word research it's a constant cause of arguments. Now I'm an absolute peacemaker. I don't enter these arguments, but you bet I'm listening to them. I've got my face pressed to the window,
right,
seeing what's going on. But the word research I find really interesting, because a lot of us call ourselves researchers that are in the paranormal because we actively put ourselves into reportedly haunted spaces. We try and incite phenomena. We'll record it in our own different ways. We'll share it in our groups, things like that. But also then when you've got the world of like more academic parapsychological research, where people are writing peer-reviewed papers and assessing, qualitative and quantitative data, and they're making things into these legitimate, academically legitimate journals, then you have those people being annoyed that the people in the middle, the paranormal researchers, are calling themselves researchers because their research isn't peer-reviewed or published. So this might be incredibly dull to some people listening. I'm so sorry. But the linguistics of the paranormal, and just how different groups of people can use the same word to mean so many different things, is a cause of constant argument and constant issues within the paranormal. But I think there's a place for everything, as long as we all just realize that we're doing distinctly different things. But yeah, certainly with paranormal TV, there's trends as well. Like you said, demons are the new black. We need a lot of demons in paranormal TV. Why? Because it's like with everything, in like even with fake mediums in the 19th century, one of them was going to give you a fake message. All right, I want something more extreme. The next one is going to bring a ghost into the room. The next one needs something more, is going to produce ectoplasm. The next one, she's going to throw herself through a window. Things are going to get more and more extreme because the audience desires it. And so it's really hard to meet that appetite while still staying true to your own ethics and your own guidelines. So it's a tricky place to be in, but it's also a very enjoyable position to be in. And it's quite a privileged position to be in. And I've enjoyed it. TV can be fun. It really can. Even if you are being possessed, I imagine it's still a riot.
Yeah, it's got to be tough for somebody like you, that when you spent your life doing this, it's kind of got to, quite frankly, just piss you off when you see some of these people that do these things when you put so much time and work into it. So that's why I was just curious to get your viewpoint on that, because I hear that a lot when I talk to people off camera about things. I've talked to some of these people that had TV shows and this and that, and you hear very interesting things off camera that you don't hear, that I don't put on. And they're like, they talk about each other, and it's like, it's fascinating to hear about it all, because we're just the viewers. The people like me, we're just the viewers, and we can only take what you give us on TV. So we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. So one of the cool things about my platform is I've getting to learn some of these stories and hear some of these things that you don't hear, which I think is absolutely fascinating. So, I know you're well versed in all things supernatural. Have you ever done any kind of UFO research? That has always been my hot button and the thing that I'm most interested in. There's a big push in the United States, even with our government, within some of our government officials, for UFO disclosure. Do you ever investigated UFOs, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, UFOs was very much one of my first loves as well. As a child, I was so sure that I was going to have a premonition, that I was going to know exactly when there was going to be like a UFO experience. There will be a UFO landing in my hometown, I'm sure of it, and I will have this magical message when it happens. And it honestly took me until I was about 10 or 11 to realize it wasn't actually happening. I wasn't going to get this message. But no, I am fascinated by UFOs. I'm not going to claim to be the best researcher in the world. I do read a heck of a lot around UFOs, and I'm particularly interested in the British crop circle phenomenon as well. I've sort of obsessively try and track new crop circles and how they're created and things like that. But yeah, UFOs constantly fascinate me, and I naturally there's a lot more evidence coming out of the US, like you said, with disclosure and things. So I do try and keep up with things as much as I can. But one thing that I still haven't done is a proper sky watch in the UK. And that's purely because I am so sick and tired of being freezing cold through all my hobbies. So I try.
We're gonna start a GoFundMe for the end of this show for you to get you some winter clothes before the end of this.
Yeah, please. Could someone buy me some thermals? I want to go and look at the sky for 6 hours. But yeah, I mean, where I'm from as well, there's the nearest river's called the Humber, and it comes in from the North Sea, and there've been bouts of rather intense was it broadly UFO sightings over the Humber. This tend to happen in clusters, and that's fascinated me because in terms of other paranormal activities or even certain aspects of folklore, there's a little bit of sparsity around that area. However, when it comes to UFOs, it's almost as if something intelligent is seeing it as a landmark or an inlet into the country, and I find that very, very interesting. So yeah, I think UFOs are endlessly fascinating because they're always at the tip of our fingertips. We're just one document away from finding out something that's truly satisfying. And I don't know about you, the amount of documents I've read from being a teenager when we just have to skip through these big black bars, just imagining what things actually say, and people going back on their stories all the time, like Roswell. I was obsessed with Roswell as a kid. One of my first ever books that I ever had was on the Roswell crash. And then over the years, seeing people change their stories and then take back their stories. It's endlessly fascinating, but it's much like paranormal reports. We're kind of at the mercy of human fallibility, but also
the Rendlesham Forest incident there has always fascinated me. The waypoint supposedly from the craft that the two U.S. service members talked about that pointed to somewhere in the Atlantic. I mean, that story has always fascinated me about that. And those guys have always stuck to that story to the end. Like they have never, ever wavered from what they said and what they saw, which, is pretty rare too. So that one, that'd be something I'd be all over trying to investigate if I was out in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, Rendlesham's really fascinating. But also the main little go-to debunk of Rendlesham is always, oh, it's a lighthouse, and a lighthouse you can see it from this distance. If you go to Rendlesham and you go to the exact spots which are mainly marked in the forest because they've got a UFO trail in the Rendlesham forest. Now they have these makeshift craft made to the original reports, which is quite fun, really. I like a bit of novelty. But when you go there yourself, a lot of the debunking attempts, they don't add up. They don't add up at all. So
you think a couple of military service members would know the difference between a lighthouse and between some kind of potential craft? I mean, that's just common sense.
Yeah, so many of these attempts to discredit UFO phenomena, it comes at the cost of discrediting incredibly experienced airmen.
Absolutely.
Which I think is a risky thing. I think that's a really risky thing.
All right, Kate, switching gears here for just a minute. You are a very accomplished writer as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about Begotten and also about your soon to be released work, Buried England?
Yeah, well, Begotten is my debut novel. It's a Gothic novel, and it's ideal for this time of year, actually. So I'm really trying to push people to be like, hey, do you want a festive haunt? Because this is right up your street. So it's a haunted house story, but it's a haunted house story with a difference. So I've always been in love with the Victorian Gothic, sort of women in big grand dresses running through haunted houses with fabulous hair. I love that, but I love how untrue it is to reality. So I wrote Begotten as a sort of an antidote to that it's a haunted house story, but I want you to question what is what is a haunting and what is the true purpose of ghosts. And really, don't monsters lie in all houses and in all societies and in, you know, and so yeah, Begotten is, I always say it's scandal, lies, and seance. That's the best way to pitch it. But it's the story of a woman who comes home after a death in the family and finds out that her house isn't as she left it, and that a lot of people must have been lying to her for a long time, and something is distinctly wrong with the house. And it's a bit of a frightener, and it's a bit of a page turner, especially towards the end. And it's gone down very well. I've been very, very pleased with the reader feedback from it. It was a real passion project to write a paranormal gothic novel for people who are really familiar with the world of ghosts. And I think I brought something quite different to that as well. So that's Begotten. That's one that's just out this year, and you can get it from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and I think it's a really good winter read, and it's a fabulous winter read. But also my next book, Buried England, is out next year, and that's non-fiction, and that is another. I always say everything's a passion project. It's quite a mad passion project, Buried England. I went all over England hunting out the country's most unusual gravestones, because I've written about graves for about 10 years now. I've academically and been involved in
you actually worked in a
cemeteries.
cemetery in your younger years,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah, I worked in a cemetery for a bit as well. So I'm racking up all those goth points. I really am. And so yeah, Buried England it's a photographic journey around England's most unusual grave sites. So there are images of the graves that I've taken myself, and little bits of information, stories about the people behind these strange graves and the stories around them. There's some that are like quite unusual folkloric things. There's some witches' graves where the people beneath them are said to be, you know, buried upside down, and to stop them from clawing their way back out. There are like enormous grand graves in the middle of London, where you have huge effigies of that individual's head. There's all manner of bizarre graves all over England, and I've collated quite a few of my favourites, which is really difficult when you spend as much time around dead people as I do. But I did whittle it down to my favourites, and they're all compiled in a book, and they'll be coming out next year. So yeah, while people are reading Begotten, I'll be pushing my publisher for a release date, and then after that, I've got more non-fiction about ghosties. So
Awesome.
my next few years are all booked up with the undead.
That's good. That's what I was going to ask you next was what's the future agenda? I'd love to see a Kate Cherrell TV show at some point where you're the solo star and follow some of your work. Nice. That would be awesome to see. You know, I think Burials and Beyond. Yeah. You need your own show called Burials and Beyond.
I know
that would be great,
isn't it?
you should pitch that. That would be very good.
Yeah. Well, TV is a fickle beast at the best of times. So while I busy myself before international stardom calls, I'm writing other books on paranormal history. So I have different books. I have one coming out that's more historical, like a view over a paranormal aspect worldwide. I'm trying to say this without giving away too much. A world view of something that's paranormal, and the other one is more of like an accessible history and how-to guide to an aspect of the paranormal. So that's what I'm working on at the minute, and I'm really, really enjoying it. So I'm looking forward to getting those finished and sent off. But yeah, in the meantime, I'm still promoting Begotten as much as I can and saying, come on, come into a big scary old house and make sure that you can't sleep until Christmas.
Well, I wanted to bring this up because I'm honored to be speaking to the winner of the Ghost Planet Network Best Paranormal Investigator in 2025. And I think I may have seen something that there's some 2026 nominations out. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I won last year. And I have a massive ghost statue in my office. It was quite a surprise. I mean, the GPN Awards are always lovely. And this year I'm nominated under 3 categories for the 2026 one, which is oh goodness, it's best investigator again, best talk, because I spoke about regional poltergeist cases at the festival last year, and best personality, which is always a relief to know that I've got one. So that's a bonus, you know. But you know, when it comes to awards, it's just nice to be recognised and to be
You
in
spent
that
your life doing
community.
this. Of course, it's nice to be recognized. You spent a lot of time doing this. So
Yeah. I've watched the X-Files so many times. Someone
same
needs
here.
to
I love the
recognize
X-Files.
that.
I love the
So good,
X-Files.
isn't it?
Oh man,
Yeah.
I've always loved the X-Files. I know I want David Duchovny is one of my dream guests at some point because I'd love to have him. I was always an X-Files guy. So I just love everything paranormal in general. And that's how I first came across your work. And I was like, man, this is cool. When I started seeing some of the stuff that you were doing. What do you like to do when you're not doing this? Is there anything you have hobbies or anything you like to do in your spare time when you're not busy rummaging through a graveyard or doing a paranormal investigation or speaking or one of the other million things that you're always doing?
Yeah, I think it's always tricky when your passion becomes your job, because then you think, oh, I'm going to do something for fun, and then you realize, oh no, this is still work. Try and switch off.
Hey, that's the dream. That's everybody's dream. So
yeah, I suppose so. I do like when I have my downtime, I basically, I wish I could say I was really cool. Like, yeah, I love going out to clubs and all of these things. No. I'm basically a 70-year-old man. So my favorite things are, I love darts, absolutely love darts, watching darts, playing darts, not very good, but I very much love darts as a sport. I like knitting and tapestry, so I've always got a big frame on the go with some sort of horrific design that only a nana could love, and just really love old comedy. So comedy that was really popular in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, as soon as I was born, there's kind of a cut off, but really old comedy, like I'm trying to think of things that are like American comics, like the Marx Brothers. I would quite happily sit and just listen to Groucho waffle on for a couple of hours, and then while I have my cup of tea and my knitting and live in old lady comfort that way. But yeah, old comedy, handicrafts, darts, and a big glass of wine, and that for me is just bliss. So yeah, that's kind of me in my happy place. Usually though, with a sneaky little ghost book on the go as well. Yeah.
Well, a big glass of wine and Begotten sounds perfect for the winter for anybody that's interested in a good read. So, any plans to visit the States or anywhere outside the UK in the future and kind of branch out a little bit, or are you just kind of happy where you're at?
No, I'm hoping to. I've got some offers for next year, so I might, just need to do a few little bits of planning, because obviously travel's really tricky at the minute.
Absolutely.
But hoping to next year will be me finally saying hello to an American spook, which will be very nice indeed. So yeah, we'll see. I'll make announcements when things are in place, but I've got some very nice offers for next year. But other than that, I will be wearing 16 jumpers in my living room until someone tempts me out with a ghost. So I'm very much like a bear. I just want to hibernate for a bit.
All right. Well, where can people find you, and how can we support you, both through your work and through GPN Awards?
Well, you can find me all over the internet under the handle Burials and Beyond. So my website, like my blog, is Burials and Beyond. My one for work is just katecherrell.com, which is just me looking quite pensive with a REM pod. I'm Burials and Beyond on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I finally made the leap into TikTok, and I'm horrific at it.
That's the one I don't have. I'm not a TikTok fan.
I keep pressing wrong buttons. I'm sending videos to random people. It's not great. I really shouldn't be trusted with it. But I've got that, and my Patreon is patreon.com/burials and beyond. And on that, I post multiple things a week, which is like articles, podcasts, videos, any new books that I'm writing, bits, drafts, questions, all of that go onto my Patreon. So that's a really lovely little community and a lovely little hub. And if you want to vote for me in the GPN Awards, I'll have links to that all over my social media, or just look up GPN Awards 2026 and vote for me if you want. If you don't, why not buy my book? Plenty of people have said it's really frightening. So yeah, Begotten's available all over the place.
Very good. Well, I'll put up links to the GPN Awards and to your works as well on all my social media and my website. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you have a busy schedule. I appreciate the time, and keep doing what you're doing. Love your work.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. Your source for real news and analysis on politics, prepping, paranormal, conspiracy theories, and the volatile state of the world we live in. Tune in next week and every week for a new episode, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay vigilant.